What happens when a nation refuses to bow to pressure from a global superpower? Right now, we are witnessing an extraordinary situation unfolding before our eyes. Nigeria, the most populous nation in Africa and the continent's largest economy, is standing resolutely against threats from President Trump, who has suggested a potentially severe military response. But let's be clear, this is not just another headline or a spat on social media. It reveals a deeper transformation in global affairs. For decades, middle powers often bent to American pressure. Today, the world is changing. Nigeria's wealth and critical resources, oil, natural gas, rare earth minerals, is something both Washington and Beijing covet. Yet what's more significant is Nigeria's stand as part of a broader movement across Africa, the refusal to accept old patterns of coercion. Historically, threats of military action were often enough to force compliance. No longer. We are seeing the power of defiance, nations calculating that submission carries greater cost than standing firm. The crucial question is not whether Trump will act, but what this standoff reveals about global power structures and whether we are moving toward negotiation or disaster. To understand how we reach this precarious point, we must look at decades of events and policies. Nothing in international relations happens in a vacuum. Nigeria's current position didn't arise from a single tweet or decision. It is the result of long-standing grievances, broken promises, and a fundamental misreading by Washington of a world that has evolved. When visiting Lagos or Abuja and speaking with economists, civic leaders, and government officials, the prevailing sentiment is not sheer anti-Americanism. It is deep disappointment. Disappointment that the promises of partnership, democracy, and economic prosperity have mostly gone unfulfilled. Instead of support, Nigeria receives structural adjustment programs that weaken social services, trade deals favoring foreign companies, and security arrangements more focused on American strategic interests than addressing local terrorism challenges. Trump's warnings didn't appear out of thin air. On November 1, 2025, President Trump ordered the Pentagon to develop military options against terrorist groups in Nigeria, claiming Christians face genocide and threatening to cut all aid while warning he could go into the country guns a-blazing if killings continued. He redesignated Nigeria as a country of particular concern for religious freedom violations, reversing its 2021 removal from that list. His statements triggered alarm across Nigeria, with protests erupting in Kano and other cities, demonstrators carrying signs reading, "We condemn Trump's threat to attack Nigeria," and "America wants to control our resources." Nigerian officials rejected the genocide characterization. Foreign Minister Yusuf Tugar stated categorically that religious persecution cannot be supported by any level of government in Nigeria, while presidential spokesperson Bayo Onanuga expressed astonishment at the invasion threat. The situation is far more complex than Trump's framing suggests. Nigeria faces overlapping security crises involving Boko Haram, Islamic State West Africa province, armed bandits, herder-farmer conflicts rooted in economic and climate pressures, and regional separatist movements. While extremist groups have targeted Christians, including church attacks and kidnappings, they have also killed Muslims deemed insufficiently radical. Security experts describe the violence as multifaceted, driven by poverty, resource scarcity, governance failures, and extremism, not a systematic state-sanctioned campaign against one religion. Nigeria's population of over 230 million is roughly evenly divided between Christians and Muslims, with Christians concentrated in the south and Muslims in the north. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, himself a Muslim who chose a Muslim running mate, faces delicate balancing in a diverse society already strained by inflation, currency struggles, and widespread poverty despite reform efforts. Beyond immediate security concerns lie deeper economic and diplomatic tensions. Nigeria has expanded ties with China through massive infrastructure projects, railways, ports, refineries, and telecom networks that Western partners failed to deliver on acceptable terms. When the West imposed conditions compromising economic sovereignty, China offered tangible development without demanding control. Critics note valid concerns about debt and labor practices, yet the infrastructure is real and usable, unlike decades of World Bank studies that produced little change. Nigeria's enormous natural gas reserves gained leverage during Europe's scramble for alternatives after the Ukraine crisis. Rather than simply supplying energy on Western terms, Nigeria negotiated hard, demanding technology transfers, majority ownership for Nigerian companies, and climate support for sustainable transition. This assertiveness caught Washington off guard. Diplomatically, Nigeria has pursued strategic autonomy. During UN votes on Russia, Nigeria abstained, not from support for violations, but from principled consistency. How could nations that invaded Iraq under false pretenses, destroyed Libya despite promises, and condoned decades of occupation claim moral authority? Nigeria's approach extends across Africa. Working with South Africa, Kenya, and Ethiopia, it articulates a collective perspective rejecting strict alignment with either the United States or China. This vision of selective partnership for African development directly challenges the old order's demand for clear allegiances. Trump's threats coincide with broader concerns about dollar dominance. Reports suggest Nigeria, like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Brazil, is exploring accepting payment for oil exports in currencies beyond the US dollar. Dollar supremacy allows America to run massive deficits and wield financial leverage through the threat of cutting nations from dollar-based systems. When major energy exporters diversify currency acceptance, it chips away at this foundation of American economic power. Trump's response explicitly warned nations moving away from the dollar might face consequences, including military action. The use of terms like vicious and guns a-blazing left no ambiguity. This was a threat of violence tied to economic decisions, not military provocations. Nigeria's response has been measured and strategic. President Tinubu delivered calm but firm addresses, emphasizing that Nigeria seeks partnership, not confrontation. But economic sovereignty is non-negotiable. Decisions about currency and trade are made in Abuja, not Washington. Behind the scenes, Nigeria mobilized diplomatically, coordinating with the African Union to invoke collective security provisions, reaching out to BRICS nations, and engaging European nations uncomfortable with American coercion. The aim is building a coalition that raises the cost of intervention so high that even hawkish administrations think twice. While Nigeria cannot match U.S. military power, it can make action politically and diplomatically costly. Any attack on Nigerian infrastructure would be viewed globally as economic coercion, not legitimate defense. This is sophisticated asymmetric resistance, using diplomacy, alliances, and global perception to constrain a stronger opponent. Nigeria's resilience is not just external. The country is complex and diverse, far from politically uniform. Deep ethnic, religious, and regional divisions shape politics. The predominantly Muslim North has different priorities than the largely Christian South. The oil-rich Niger Delta has long-standing grievances with the federal government. Separatist movements, insurgencies, and a history of coups complicate governance. American intelligence undoubtedly understands these fault lines. Historically, when foreign powers cannot achieve compliance through diplomacy, they exploit divisions, supporting opposition groups or regional secession to weaken central governments. This tactic has been employed in Libya, Syria, and Sudan. Amid these pressures, Nigerian civil society remains vocal and engaged. Academics, journalists, and activists frame the current moment in explicitly post-colonial terms, drawing parallels with Patrice Lumumba in Congo and Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, leaders who prioritized national and African interests over foreign demands. There is recognition that defiance carries risk. History shows those resisting coercive interventions often paid steep prices. But there is also understanding that continuous acquiescence perpetuates underdevelopment and dependence. The central question Nigerians grapple with is profound. Is it safer to submit and avoid immediate danger, or to assert sovereignty and face uncertainty in pursuit of long-term self-determination? This debate goes beyond policy. It touches the very identity and future of the nation. At its core, the crisis reflects broader transformation in global power dynamics. We are witnessing the waning of American primacy. For decades after the Cold War, the U.S. exercised unmatched influence, able to dictate terms in trade, diplomacy, and military affairs with minimal pushback. That era is fading, not because the United States is weak, but because other nations have grown stronger and more assertive. China now rivals the U.S. in economic might when measured by purchasing power. India, Brazil, Indonesia, and Nigeria itself are emerging as major global players. As American dominance is increasingly challenged, the risk grows that a declining hegemon may resort to force rather than adapting to a multipolar world. Trump's threat against Nigeria can be seen in this context, not a rational strategic move, but a reaction to the loss of automatic compliance past administrations could take for granted. Nigeria's importance goes far beyond politics. It is an economic powerhouse. With a population exceeding 230 million, Nigeria is larger than Russia and more than twice the size of Germany in terms of people. Its youth-driven demographic represents a massive consumer market poised for growth. The country is rich not only in oil and gas, but also in solid minerals, agricultural potential, and strategically positioned as a gateway to West African markets of over 400 million people. This makes Nigeria critical to global commerce and American economic interests. A confrontation would threaten investments, disrupt supply chains, and set a precedent. If Nigeria can assert control over its currency arrangements, why not Indonesia, Vietnam, or Mexico? The ripple effect could challenge dollar dominance and reshape trade relationships worldwide. There is also a military dimension. The U.S. has sought larger presence in West Africa to counter terrorism and growing influence from China and Russia. Nigeria, however, has resisted hosting permanent bases, allowing only limited cooperation. Its location, military capacity, and diplomatic clout make it essential for any regional security strategy. Yet partnership requires mutual respect and shared benefit, conditions American policymakers seem to overlook. The security situation within Nigeria adds complexity. Extremist groups like Boko Haram, banditry, kidnapping, and communal clashes present serious challenges, particularly in northern regions. Yet American counterterrorism assistance has had limited impact. Intelligence sharing often prioritizes American interests. Training programs fail to address local realities. Military solutions alone cannot solve fundamentally political and economic problems. Development, education, and infrastructure are the tools Nigeria needs to address insecurity sustainably. Climate change is another critical factor often ignored in discussions about this standoff. Nigeria is highly vulnerable to rising sea levels, desertification, and extreme weather. Coastal cities like Lagos face risk, while desert encroachment drives conflicts between herders and farmers. Nigeria's strategy is pragmatic. Use current fossil fuel revenues to fund development and climate resilience while gradually transitioning to cleaner energy. Yet Western nations, having already industrialized using fossil fuels, demand immediate decarbonization without providing sufficient financial or technological support. The result is a paradox. Nigeria is asked to choose between development and climate responsibility, a false choice ignoring reality. The Nigerian government attempts a balanced path, generating revenue for national growth while preparing for sustainable energy transition. Threats from Washington complicate this delicate balancing act. Where does this leave the world? We now have a determined Nigeria asserting economic sovereignty and a U.S. administration threatening military action to enforce its preferences. The global community watches closely, trying to assess whether American power can still compel compliance, or whether the world has reached a tipping point where even threats are insufficient. The coming weeks and months are precarious. There are countless ways tensions could escalate. An oil facility could be sabotaged, an American citizen attacked, or a military exercise misread as preparation for aggression. Miscalculations on either side could rapidly spiral into larger conflict, especially when trust is absent and worst-case assumptions dominate. Yet there is paradoxical hope in the absurdity of the situation. The notion of going to war over currency arrangements is so disproportionate and self-defeating that it's possible cooler heads will prevail within Washington. There remain officials in the Pentagon, State Department, Congress, and business circles who understand military force cannot solve every problem. They know conflict with Nigeria would be economically costly, diplomatically damaging, and strategically counterproductive. But there is risk. If threats are merely bluffs and Nigeria calls them, the U.S. faces a dilemma: either back down and weaken credibility, or follow through and enter a conflict it never truly wanted. This is a dangerous game with high stakes, not just for Nigeria, but for the future of international order. At a deeper level, this standoff is about the kind of world we want to live in. Do we accept a world governed by coercion and might, where strong powers dictate the choices of weaker nations? Or do we embrace an international system guided by norms and rules, where sovereignty and self-determination are respected and disputes are resolved through dialogue rather than threats? The gap between U.S. rhetoric and practice, supporting sovereignty and democracy in principle, but intervening when national interests are challenged, has eroded credibility, particularly in the global South. Nigeria's situation is a test case. Will it be allowed to act independently, or will it be coerced into submission? Will other African nations support it, or will fear of American power keep them silent? Will nations across Europe, Asia, and Latin America defend principles, or will they acquiesce to pressure? These are the questions shaping the international order for decades to come. We as Americans cannot view this from the sidelines. The actions being considered are carried out in our name, with our resources, by leaders we elect. If we believe that threatening war over currency decisions is wrong, immoral, unnecessary, and counterproductive, we have a duty to act. Speak out, contact representatives, support organizations advocating for more peaceful, just foreign policy. Challenge the militaristic mindset dominating discourse. True security for the United States does not come from fear. It comes from respect, and respect cannot be forced. It is earned through partnership, fairness, and shared prosperity. Nigeria is not our adversary. Its people are not our enemies. They are human beings striving for better lives for themselves and their children, just as we are. Their success strengthens the world. It does not threaten it. Embracing this mindset is essential if we are to avoid a confrontation that benefits no one and harms everyone involved. This moment is a test for the international system, for U.S. leadership, and for humanity's capacity to transition from an era dominated by coercion to one grounded in dialogue and cooperation. Choices we make now, by leaders and citizens alike, will determine whether the coming decades are defined by conflict or collaboration, by fear or by mutual respect. Nigeria's stand is a defining example of what sovereignty and strategic independence look like in the 21st century. How the United States responds will signal to the world whether we can adapt to a multipolar reality with humility, foresight, and restraint, or whether we will cling to the illusion of absolute dominance, risking instability for all. The path forward is clear. Recognize legitimate interests, pursue partnership over coercion, respect sovereignty, and act with patience, prudence, and principle.